Hello, I'm Brad Kelly, and you're listening to Method and Madness. This is a show about books, the people who write them, and the labyrinth to be explored between the words.
Have you ever heard about Willie the Weeper? Had a job as a chimney sweeper. He had the dope habit and he had his bad. Listen while I tell you about a dream he had.
I am joined this evening by Lake Markham, who is a writer and photographer based in Chicago, Illinois. His latest work is a novel entitled LO SIENTO. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. My Spanish is awful.
That's it.
That's it, Lo Siento. Okay, good. I figured that was close. It's coming out on the great press Apocalypse Confidential on October 21st, I believe is the date, right?
That's
so
it.
If you're listening to this and it's not quite yet October 21st, pre-order. I'm assuming it's available for pre-order. Is that right?
Yes, it is available for pre-order now.
Good. Definitely do that. And I know that helps the publisher figure out, kind of game plan and make sure they know what they're dealing with. And on top of that, I just highly recommend it. So if you're looking for something that's funny and touching and smart and compelling and different, this is the book for you. I think I read it in about 4 sittings because it's a compelling read. It's, that's my basic test for a book is like, do I care what happens on the next page? And I absolutely 100% did all the way through reading Lo Siento. So, Lake, thanks for joining me. Welcome. Thanks for sharing your great book with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for taking the time to read it, and I'm glad to hear the metrics behind the read time on that one. So.
Yeah, I mean, beyond that, there's a lot of ways we can go, but there's a lot of stuff I've sort of come across that, someone likes it. I obviously taste is highly subjective, but for me, it's like, yeah, do I want to read it? Seems like the basic threshold.
I feel the same way.
Book.
Yeah, especially if you go to like crossing genres, or if you're reading lots of different kinds of book. Always, to me, the fundamental thing is this engaging? Does this grab me, or is this like making me strain to be patient, which is another thing I appreciate in a book.
Sure. And sometimes you gotta like some stuff pays off the effort, right? For sure. Like it's hard to stick with and follow through, and you gotta Google things constantly or whatever, and it's all worth it. But this felt like, this is like, I would have loved to have actually, one of my favorite times to read is if I have a long plane flight, because I think I can just read the whole time undisturbed. I have nothing else to do. I would have loved to have this. I would have just read. It would have been like one good long plane flight. I think I could have knocked it out, and it would have been
incredible.
It would have been it'd have been a great travel day. Tell us, I was going to try to give a summary for this, for Lo Siento, or a sort of back cover, but why don't you give us your, kind of elevator pitch for this book?
Yeah, that's really tricky. I've had to kind of talk about it, and I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Okay.
I've always thought, I always wanted to write a book like Impressionist music is, where you can't really sing the melody, and so that was one of my goals here. But essentially it's, like maybe postmodern Western, or what I've been calling it lately is more of a cartoon Western.
Yeah.
But it just sort of follows multiple perspectives, sort of after the havoc is wrought on this town following a catastrophic chili cook-off. And of course, a stranger comes to town and all that, figures out, starts to learn the history of the town. There's a traveling magician who is also a trucker. There is a jewel thief. There is a motel owner-operator. There's a hapless sheriff and his existentially fraught reverend friend. And all this is sort of working throughout history and having impacts downstream,
Yeah. I think that's pretty good. I mean, you set up all the cast of characters is awesome. And I don't love putting everything in sort of cinematic terms, but this feels like ensemble cast. And I don't know how you feel about this filmmaker, but for me, this is a high compliment. This feels like sort of Wes Anderson territory a little bit.
Okay.
Just in this like highly, very carefully articulated set that is its own world that has, to a certain extent, its own rules. And it sort of plays itself out in a very, it's charming also.
Yeah, I
So,
love that. Well, I
yeah,
appreciate
yeah,
that. Was definitely
yeah,
something I wanted it to be, sort of this place on the ether, like
yeah,
there's no outside of it, there's no inside, or there's, yeah,
yeah,
no outside.
yeah, for sure. Well, so I got a few questions for you about it that I hope will take us to some interesting places. What was, who is the first character that sort of arrived for you in coming up with this?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So I remember I've listened to several podcasts of yours now, and I've been thinking about, what was the genesis of this? And I would say Reverend Francis, that
Okay.
existentially fraught Reverend character. Yeah. I had this
With the
really,
with
really
the kolaches.
with the kolaches, yeah, and
Yeah.
those might have been a late stage development, but he was always a baker. Um,
Okay.
and I was living in an RV in Austin for most of my time there. And I was working as a dishwasher at this bar, and it was pretty not a fun place in my life, you know what I mean? But I would spend the shift kind of thinking up characters, cooking up characters, seeing what was going on out on the floor. And I'd get back to this RV and I'd just be really, really like, oh, what am I doing? And so I was motivated by this like priest-like character who, had fucked up at some stage in his life. And anyway, now he'd made good and he was biking up the hill on his little 3-speed bicycle covered in flour. That was a very, I guess, generative point for me. And then I would say the character Buck Owens was a pretty early one as well, although I had to kind of work. I didn't know what I was going to call him for the longest time. And so I settled on Buck Owens because it felt right. I liked the
Yeah.
ambiguity it introduced.
Yeah, no, I love that. Honestly, when I first started reading and came across the name Buck Owens, I was like, he knows Buck Owens is a real guy, right? Like, I hoped that this hadn't been like an editorial mistake, and it pays off great, and it ends up being awesome. And I'm so happy for that. But when I first came across it, I was like, dude, did they? I hope he Googled Buck Owens.
That's exactly sort of the response that I want the reader to have.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. No, and he's incredible. He's by far my favorite character.
Okay.
He's the sort of, he's one of these guys in the small town, and I've seen this in small towns where there's like a guy who's not really in any official position. He's sort of a doer, I guess, and has some money, and so he's sort of like the unauthorized mayor, kind of, because
Yes.
just because he's got sort of the most gravity of anybody there and can make things happen, and everybody knows him, etc. And then he's writing these awesome little self-help books. Yeah, he's a really incredible character. I mean, I think that's probably where, for me, that's where, like, there's a lot of humor in this book. That's probably where the biggest, the highest octane humor is in
Okay.
his whole arc, his whole personality. Is that based at all on somebody you know, or is that like pulling pieces together? Like, how do you come up with I hate asking how do you come up with, but like, where are you drawing from to come up with a guy like that, do you think?
That's a great question. I'm glad that you were the most entertained by him, because he was definitely some of the most entertaining to write. But I would say, so you kind of hit the nail on the head, right? Like the unofficial mayor of the town. Lo Siento, I was road tripping between Tennessee and Texas, and I just stopped into Mobile, Alabama just because for a week. The first time I'd ever been there. And this is like 2016, so much different sort of feeling on the air, I think. Yeah. But there was this little unincorporated municipality outside it called Perdido, which means lost in Spanish. And it just dilapidated. You know what I mean? Passing through there, just rusted, shuttered. I stopped at a gas station and there was like a huge man in this little beat up pickup truck with like his chihuahua, just like a place you don't want him. But I was thinking about, like, I wonder if any of these people know what the word perdido means, in Alabama. And so the whole thing was sort of motivated by this, like, this tension or this irony of like, what would have to happen to live in this town for an entire life and not know what it meant, what the name meant. But Buck Owens, so I go to Mobile, whatever, and I was just going to a lot of bars at that time in my life. I was 21, 22, and just doing it to do it, see who I can meet, go to bars and just start talking to people. And yeah, very much like you say, like I met, on this random trip, just, lawyer, somebody who worked at the post office, somebody at the bar, right? And woke up the next morning after this night out, and I was walking down the sidewalk, and the lawyer, almost runs into me pulling out of a parking lot, and he's like, "Hey, man, I'll see you tonight." So they all reconvened at this bar every single night. And I think, yeah, Buck Owens has just sort of captured the energy of that, or at least that was my intent. And, what would it take to be sort of, as you said, the superhero of small town, right, South?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. And that's one of a number of ways I think you've managed to capture that sort of insulated feeling. It's sort of like, and this is to me, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, the sort of idea of it being a Western. I mean, part of what makes this book a Western to me, obviously setting is a big piece of that, but I like to think you could set a story not in Texas or the West and still do all the sort of trappings of the genre, and it's still basically a Western. And one of them is, I think, a convention of the Western genre is that you have a group of people or a community who are like, they're sort of off the grid in terms of like, there's not really institutional support outside of them. As far as they're concerned, like there is no federal government kind of, and not even in like a Ted Kaczynski survivalist way. It's just like you get far enough out there and you're kind of on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I think part of it to me too is like, so are you by any chance familiar with Frederick Jackson Turner?
No.
He was a history professor in the 19th century, in the U.S., right around the time that they Congress decided that they were no longer going to sort of monitor any type of frontier and encouraging people to go out and explore the West, but he is sort of the one who came up with what we know of as the frontier thesis, and how it's so definitive of American life for better or for worse, right? Like culturally, politically. But like there is this idea that out on the frontier, the European sensibilities of the old world sort of fail. You have to get pragmatic, in a lot of ways, which like maybe not ironically, the only American philosophical movement ever is pragmatism. So I find that frontier piece to go hand in hand with sort of that like suspension of powers or suspension of infrastructure. And there's a lot of that, I think, that informs the Western. Because we think about a Western, like you said, you can strip away the geography and put it in space, right? Like the cyberspace, and you get cyberpunk.
And it works, and it does kind of work well in those environments. And it does seem like the frontier is I don't say this in like a chauvinist way, but it's like it seems to be a peculiar part of like the American sensibility versus the European sensibility. Like this, I feel like America culturally, like it almost needs a frontier to sort of sustain itself, kind of. I think it gets weird once we run out of one, like yeah. Like we start to I think we start to look for conflict, and we look for new edges to run, and like and
absolutely,
all that sort of
look for it internally or within the sort of body politic. Even like from a commercial perspective, right? It's like we have everything we could ever want, but we've got to just keep coming up with more stuff to keep.
There's one more thing out there on the horizon that we could get to. Right. Yeah, for sure.
And I wonder too, like how much of it. Because I start the book with a Kierkegaard quote, right? Like, this is the ultimate paradox of thought, to want to discover what thought can't itself think. But this is not something I've developed a whole lot, but just the question of whether maybe, in the 19th century when America was starting to sort of become much more robust and become like, some sort of trade hub and et cetera, be more and more established. If this was a thought on the air, which sort of informed what America was, and, it just sort of happened to capture what was going on in the West at that time, and that became a definitive part of its DNA. Or if it is truly that America, is based on that and exported that frontier to the rest of the world.
Yeah, yeah. Like I wonder sometimes too, like if there is a certain degree of, I mean, I don't know how much of that quality is like heritable. Like, is there an aspect that's sort of like the people, who came, the Europeans who came to America were of a certain sort of personality type, and they all had kids, and I don't
rejects.
Really know. Yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, it is. I think about sort of my ancestors all came here late 19th century, very early 20th century, and like they must have been maniacs in a way, or desperate. Like it's
just
not
willing
a
to risk it all.
Really, yeah. It's pretty. It's kind of a. And so I can see that. Just that attitude informing this.
That's a good point.
Degree.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, from a literary standpoint, it's interesting too because I think America has been one thing I am sort of have a little bit of American chauvinism about is I think that the American literary tradition is actually like pretty amazing, even relative to the rest of the world. The Western, I mean, we sort of invented the Western. I don't even know if that would be disputable or not, really.
I don't think there's any way to dispute it. It makes me think, too, if we think about the Western there's this question I have where it's almost like, okay, well, film reaches this sort of, like, certain quintessential form in like late 40s, early 50s, and right around that time we start to see the Western as like a rehashing perhaps of the samurai film, right? Like a lot of these same sort of masculine heroes, similar civil backdrops, maybe abandonment or transition in federal powers or whatever it is. And so it's like, I wonder if to some extent the Western was like a vehicle for filmmaking, because that's where like the filmic technology sort of, if Clint Eastwood says that the film is, the truly American art form, then I wonder how we can read that into the Western.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That it's sort of like it becomes and there's a way in which they kind of co-create each other, right? Because the Western that I have, the sort of Western lifestyle or whatever that I have in my head, the Wild West, the frontiers, is largely a figment that has been built up by seeing Western movies.
Totally,
right?
yeah.
And then the popularity of the Western is sort of the driving engine of the film industry and film budgets and all of that. So there is this way in which they sort of fed off of each, and they still do. I'm pleasantly surprised that Western films still come out, to be honest. Like, I mean, Eddington is this recent example. It's a Western in a lot of ways that we're talking about, and it's maybe not so much a Western in some other ways. But there's every year or two there's a Western that gets some critical and commercial love. I find that absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, like Jordan Peele's 2022, The Nope. That was one of the best movies I had seen in theaters. Like at that point, it's really good.
Is it?
Yeah,
okay.
And I would say it embraces like similar kind of themes, Lo Siento, like showmanship, spectatorship. And I do always think that I don't know, that's a broad statement, but it seems like the Western tends to take on that showmanship sort of, it has room for that, avenue.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I as we're kind of talking about film here, and we can circle back around to the Western because I do have another question there. But I did get curious. I know you're a photographer as well, and I was kind of curious. How do you feel? Do you feel like there's a relationship between your photography and your writing? Do you feel like one informs the other? Do you learn? Tell me like what's in the Venn diagram between those two.
That's a really good question. Yeah, I always wonder about that too. One of the something I'll never forget is like scrolling on Twitter at some point over the past, 12 years or whatever. And I only know I've been on there for 12 years because I got my anniversary badge yesterday.
Oh,
But
okay, nice.
but I remember just scrolling onto somebody's tweet and they had quote tweeted somebody saying something stupid, and the person said like, "Of course, leave it to a photographer to have a terrible effing idea." I was like, "Oh yeah, okay, cool. Do I identify with that?"
Is
But
that what photographers are known for? I didn't know. I didn't realize that.
I don't know. I do always think about that Susan Sontag book though on photography. I don't know if you've read that, but
I haven't. No.
it's a really fantastic book. It's written in I believe 77. It's in the 70s, so like
Okay, yeah.
photography is in a much different point of its life than it is now. But she makes the really good point, one of many points that sort of has changed the way that I think about not only the world, but like photography and photography's role in the world. She's like, for every photo that's taken, right, everything that is adding to this ongoing collective sort of global archive, we are not only sort of expanding the notion of what photography can do, but we are also changing the world into something that ought to be photographed, kind of.
Yeah.
And so and obviously maybe that's a little bit like everybody kind of picks up on that a little bit, like with Instagram and everybody having a camera in their wallet. But yeah, I do think about that quite a bit, and just like the relationship between the world I'm writing about and like whether it's photographic potency has sort of been exhausted or tapped, or if there's some other way that I should be writing about it. And I think too, I'm a very visual person just generally. And I remember when I really first got into writing, I would talk about it with my professor. Just one of the things that always attracted me to the medium was like, I can, paint a shadow onto an object in words, or, like I can describe the way that butter melts in a pan or whatever it might be. And like, there is that ability to make you see something in your head that doesn't exist with photography. It's almost like the negative of photography in that way,
Yeah. It's interesting. This is you're tapping into. I asked Andrew Edwards, the writer Andrew Edwards, when he was on here, this question, and it basically you already answered it. What's that?
The mind's eye.
Yeah. I do really believe that that's like secretly the every really strong fiction writer, I think, actually has that. Like, I think, and it makes sense. It makes sense at a certain level, but I don't know that would be the most obvious choice as an ability.
Definitive.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think I would tend to agree, because all the fiction that I like reading has that. But even like one of my favorite writers or like thinkers, whatever, is Aristotle, and so much of his work is just him describing sort of observations, or like watching sticks in the water and the way that their shadows, So I agree.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to bring this up when we talk about Cormac McCarthy's SUTTREE in a minute, but I have another question that I have suspicions about for writers more generally, and a significant segment of the audience for this show is writers, so I always like to give them some fodder and find out for myself. One of the things that's so strong about Lo Siento is this, we've sort of talked about it already, coming out of that experience you had in that town of Perdido with the lawyer, bumping into him on the street, and the sort of cast of characters. There's so many, all of the characters in Lo Siento are so well rendered. And I got wondering, like, how important is listening to people to you, like, as a writer, like eavesdropping / also just talking to people, gossip, like, is that stuff important? Do you feel like that's important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's an imperative for a writer to talk to people and chat with people and hear what's going on when they don't, when other people aren't aware that they're listening. I think, just being a fly on the wall is one of my favorite things. I grew up in Japan.
Oh, really?
And,
wow.
Yeah, I would ride the public transit. I had a friend that I would ride it with sometimes, and we just buy a ticket for, like 300 yen, $3, whatever. I don't remember what it was. We'd ride it to the end of the line and then just kind of come back, and that's how we'd spend a Sunday afternoon.
That's pretty cool.
And I don't know, just this like, not even voyeuristic, just there's so much of the world to experience, and you can do it silently and unobtrusively,
Yeah.
I think, just natural activity of the world, but also the social organism. Yeah, for sure. I love chatting with people. I mean, that made up a lot of my early 20s, especially when I was bartending, In Mobile, I remember this really distinctively too. This was a different trip, but I was like bartending in Nashville, and I stopped down from, a weekend in Mobile, and I'm mentioning, I'm just shooting the shit with a bartender and asking about the whiskeys that they had, in Alabama. And bartender, after I finish my drink, gets me up and walks me down the street to another bar and sits me down and says, "Hey, he's a bartender in Nashville. Why don't you pour him one of these and one of these?" Just stuff like that. Stuff that you wouldn't find yourself doing if you weren't chatting with somebody.
Right.
So yeah, that's always been really important to me, because you never know what is on the other side of a conversation.
Yeah, and you never, right, not even just like an opportunity or an experience.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a way to, I'm not even particularly, I mean, I know I do this podcast and stuff, but I'm actually a fairly introverted guy. Like, my social life is fine, but it's not very, there's not a lot to it. I've got a handful of friends I see occasionally. But I do feel like there's I do feel like over time I've found myself being this person that people just tell stuff to. I don't know if you've experienced this. And I don't know if it's how I look at them. Like, I don't know what it is exactly, but I feel like I run into this often where I will by circumstance be talking to somebody, and I will get something that I'm pretty sure that they don't tell everybody, or even maybe find out later that that's almost a secret. So,
and you're like, what about me and my demeanor elicited this? And
I wasn't asking for it, but yeah,
and it can feel like a reward sometimes. Though, it's like, wow, they really trust me with that. I won't tell anybody.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting. I find a lot of that. I mean, I'm always sort of looking for characters to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Never ripping them off completely, but like looking for little turns of phrase and little ways that somebody might express something. And I can tell that you've really sort of studied a variety, a whole rogues gallery of people. I think that's one of the coolest things about this book. Really, is just like, who am I going to meet next? What's their deal going to be? Yeah.
Hell yeah. Have you ever read by any chance, just while we're on this topic, Felipe Alfau's book Locos, A Comedy of Gestures?
No.
It's really good. I found it on Twitter in 2019, and I'd never heard of it before. Nobody I've asked about it's ever heard of it, but really glad I read it. And it's this sort of similarly, this narrator, it's one of those novels that's short chapters that are all kind of the same thing though. But he just drops into this cafe, and he's telling you, I'm going here to meet my characters, and before he can do that, he's in a conversation with somebody, and that leads to one thing, and so on, and it unfolds and sort of yarn like. But it's a really good book if you're into that. I certainly drew inspiration from it.
What was the title of it? Locos?
Locos, A Comedy of Gestures. Yeah.
Comedy of Gestures. All right. That's cool, man. Yeah, I'll definitely take a look. But I'm always also trying to find, like, the fact that you said that I've never heard anybody else read it. I'm like, okay, I definitely want to get it on that.
Yeah. I know the feeling.
Yeah. A couple other things just on Lo Siento still. Tell me a little bit about Texas. Like, I know a little bit about Texas, but what is Texas? What is Texas to you? Also, you say, I think in your acknowledgments or somewhere I saw, you had a great phrase and I didn't copy it down about your relationship with Texas. Where did it go?
I settled my debts with the Lone Star State.
Yes. What does that mean?
So when I moved to Texas, I did it and I kind of blew up my life, not intentionally, but stuff just, kind of moved there, ran out of money. I stopped in Austin because I knew some people and I had enough money for 1 month rent, that kind of thing. That part is very true from the novel. Um, but like after it fell apart, it just kind of continued and would not stop falling apart, you know. And I didn't know anybody. I was 22, and I was like, I'm gonna do this. I've never set foot in Texas before. Let's give it a shot.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I don't know. So I think there's a part of Texas to me that's just like deeply personal, where like it just didn't work, you know. And I had to move back to Nashville and kind of deal with the fallout of these decisions I'd made rather irresponsibly. But I also think that like Texas, and I actually wrote a photo zine. I did a photo zine called Hyperreal Texas about like the location in the American conscience or like the American imagination that Texas occupies, because I do think that it occupies a very strange place culturally. Um, and so I don't know, Texas is a place of extremes, right? It's like intensity of heat, intensity of light, intensity of, you know, you go out west, like all the weather wants to kill you, all the animals do, you know, they're, I don't know if you spend any time in West Texas, but there are like roads that wrap really, really tightly around mountains, and, you know, the speed limit's 90 miles an hour, and it's like
Right.
there's no cell reception. Anything goes wrong. If I barrel down this mountain, I'm just going to die.
Yeah.
And so there are all these like really extreme, sort of sublime elements and components of Texas, just without even getting into some of the cultural stuff, right?
Right.
And it is culturally like a very strange place. Like, to suspend the political piece, like I really deeply believe in what Texas can be. You know, as sort of this like site of interfacing with lots of different cultures, lots of different peoples, languages. Um, you know, and it's, I didn't know about sort of the relationship between American, German, and Mexican culture until I moved to Texas, and the way that all three of those sort of uniquely occupy that area of the. So to me, Texas
Yeah.
like is a real, really, really cool place. Every corner could be, you know, its own climate, its own sort of ecosystem, right? It's so different from one side to the next. Um, so yeah, I'm very passionate about the state of Texas for some reason,
Yeah.
but yeah,
I
that's
get it. I mean, yeah, I've been nodding along to all of this. There's also something about just the scope, the sheer size of the place
yeah,
is. Yeah, when I moved there, I was living in Idaho, and I drove to Austin, and just you know, and America's a big country, and I've done a lot of driving in it and riding buses and all kinds of stuff, but getting into Texas and still having, I think, 16 hours of driving to get to Austin blew my
yeah,
mind.
yeah. I
You know,
have
it's so big. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have a short story called Tape Deck about driving through Texas. But yeah, like you can drive a long time and still be in
Long way.
Texas.
You
It's
keep
really
going.
remarkable. Yeah.
And then also you'll just pass through a city that, for me, my experience, you'll pass through these very interesting, sometimes strange
Yes.
towns that are from the past. And then sometimes you'll pass through a city that, for me anyway, I'd never heard of, and I Google it and we're like, oh, 100,000 people live here. Like, how
Yeah.
is that possible?
How
And I
did that
never heard of
happen?
it.
Yeah. I
You know?
you're so spot on. And the towns have the strangest names too. And one thing too I love about Texas is you get out far enough west and they're just like you're not going to find gas after this on the billboards, you know.
Oh.
One time in you asked about Buck Owens, here's another thing.
Yeah.
I was driving through Texas. I think I was crossing from like central Texas into West Texas or something like that. And it was like, you know, last gas 90 miles. And it also said free gator bites. And below that, it said live tiger. And I'm like, well, I got it. You know, I can't not.
Okay, right.
And so I go in there, you know, and I like go fill up my gas. I take care of the important stuff first. I probably buy a pack of cigarettes. I get some gator bites. They suck. They're really bad. But I'm like, okay, well, I've done the gas. I've done the gator bites. Like,
Where's this tiger?
where's this tiger? Yeah. And it's like night, you know, it's dark out. And I'm in there and I say something to one of the guys in the line at the register. And I'm like, where's the tiger at? And he's like, oh, he just points through the glass and just sort of some patch of grass outside. And he says, he's right there. Can't you see him? I was
Yeah.
like, Uh, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm being messed with, you know. And so
Right.
he leaves, and I go up to the counter. I'm like, hey man, I saw the live tiger on the sign, and he's asleep right now. He's out
Yeah.
there, you know. And they were just all in on this sort of like joke, I guess. But I was like,
Right.
man, I got to get out of here. You know? This is
Right. Did they
weird.
lure, I mean, did they lure me into get gator bites, or is there something else afoot? Yeah.
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 Well,
Tell me a little bit about Lone Star versus Shiner.
oh my goodness. Well, I have a soft spot in my heart for both of them. Lone Star beer, fantastic shit beer. That's what you can find me sipping on. That's what we're gonna have. Although I feel differently about it now that they've taken the riddles off the bottoms of the caps.
Oh, did they? Oh,
So they
okay.
took the riddles off the bottoms of the caps during and after the pandemic because of supply chain stuff. Then they put them back on, but now they've taken them back off again. So
Yeah.
anyway, I we're buying case of Lone Star for the Chicago Chili Cook-Off, the big book launch party. I whenever I see a Lone Star sign in a window, I'm like with my girlfriend, hey babe, we gotta stop in there. Like that's a bar we gotta check out. But I remember last time I grabbed a Lone Star at a bar, I told her, you know what? Because I A-B'd it with the Shiner, and I was like, man, I hate to say it, Shiner's the better beer.
Yeah. Blind
But
taste test. Yeah.
yeah, you
Yeah.
can't really dispute it. I have, man, Shiner, the whole Shiner operation is pretty cool. So I wonder how much of that informed parts of this book too. So somewhere in one of these notebooks, I saved it, I scanned it to my computer. I have like a label from the back of a Shiner bottle, one of the flavors you can only get in Texas. And, you know, there's a drawing and it's like, you know, the town where there's only one stoplight, whatever.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know. I really admire that. Sort of that's part of their story, but yet they're one of the more adventurous macro breweries, you know, that there is. And they've got, you know, their seasonals that everybody looks forward to. They've got their Texas only flavors. It's like a really cool operation. But all this sort of rivalry in the book is inspired by I met this actually the dude's name was Jericho, like the cowboy in the book, but he
Oh,
was
okay.
this
Yeah.
old cowboy that I met out west and would just not drink Shiner Bock. And you know, we had come in, we bought our Texas beer, we stopped at this spot in West Texas, and our Airbnb hosts were there shooting pool, and they turned out to be really cool and invited this cowboy over. And, you know, he was drinking Lone Star cans, wouldn't drink it out of a bottle. And I was like, well, I got Shiner in a can. He walked a mile one way and a mile back because he had to have his Lone Star can after he ran out, you know? He was like, I don't want that Shiner shit. I'll never forget. And it's like, man, it's a Texas beer.
It's a Texas beer. It's pretty good. Like, what's the beef?
I know.
That's funny, but yeah. That's awesome.
Texan mystery.
I knew when the part in the book when it was somebody who refused to drink it, who would only drink it out of a can. I knew that had to have happened. I don't know if it was you or somebody else, but I knew that was a real thing for sure. Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the sort of I refer to it as the regional swill, and like every part of the country has their own
Old
and
style where I'm
old
at.
style
Yeah.
where you're at. Yeah, it's Stroh's where I'm at, which is really shitty beer.
Okay.
But like everywhere I've been, there's always like in the Northwest, there's Olympia, in upstate New York where I lived for a while. There's a few Genesee brewery beers. There, like every part of the country's got these things, and it's kind of interesting. Like somebody should do that coffee table book. That's just like
Regional
Swills of
swill.
America. Yeah,
Dude.
and it's one page is like the history of it, and the other page is like labels and
Yep.
photography.
Acquisitions. I'd be interested in an acquisitions
Yeah.
piece too. And
Yeah.
so I've noticed that, and I know that for sure, having lived in like a couple parts of the country at this point. But I've always thought, and I might be wrong, but the Southeast is distinctly missing its own regional
Is it?
swill. I think so.
I can't think of one.
That's
I don't
I'm
know
at a
one.
loss.
I don't know one. Yeah, you're probably
Maybe
right.
Florida?
I think you might be right.
Yeah.
Florida might have one, but I'm not.
PBR.
It's not on
That's
my
all
radar.
we drank down there. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's an interest. That is interesting. I'm trying to think. Well, you're going on a book tour, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to Asheville.
That's right.
Is
Yeah,
that
I've got
correct?
my.
Yeah.
Well, Asheville's
You have
just
to
like
check
the
out.
beer capital of the East Coast, right? So maybe I won't even get the chance to have any regional swill. I guess we'll see. We'll do a little R&D.
Yeah, it's a cool. I don't know if you've been there or not. That's a really cool little city.
This will be my first time. Yeah, I've got some friends who have lived there, have since passed on, and I've got some internet friends I excited to meet. So yeah, I'm stoked.
Yeah, it's cool. Where else? Where else are you going on a tour? Hopefully, maybe some people listening to the show will be able to catch it.
Yeah, I'm going on tour in Asheville's first. That's the same day the book comes out, October 21st. I'll be in Philly on 10/25, and I'm reading with a couple of folks there that I have followed online for a couple years. I'm really excited about. Then Chicago is 11/1. Austin is 10/29.
Nice.
I'm really stoked on all the readings, honestly. Reading with some mutuals that I've known at all of them. So I think it'll be a good time.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that's fantastic. No, this is cool. There seems like there's a bit of a, maybe I'm just more tapped into it now, but I feel like I'm seeing stuff for readings all the time now. Maybe this is not where I'm at. We're distinctly, other than my friend Dave Kuhnlein, there's a distinct lack of. I'm in the Detroit area. There's a distinct lack of literary activity here. Most of it's happening apparently in my house, is what it seems like. So.
Nice. There you go, trendsetter. Yeah. I was telling somebody maybe a year or two ago, I was like, I think it seems to me like indie lit is about to go through a similar thing that indie rock did, and it seems that's very much happening, where it's like you have all these super small presses putting out books, like full physical books. You have people, going on tours, getting together in living rooms. I think too, the drive to get off social media, it probably has something to do with it. Like using social media as a way to get in a room with people who are into the same stuff.
Yeah, you find out that they're actually, for me anyway, you feel like a bit of a weirdo, and then you find out there are a bunch of people you can connect with, except they just live everywhere else. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, exactly.
So find a reason to get in the same room, for sure. So one other thing, we were kind of talking and thinking about what to talk about, and you were reading Cormac McCarthy's SUTTREE, or I think you say it's SUTTREE. I heard somebody pronounce it a much more pretentious way than that once, but I'm going to keep calling it SUTTREE.
SUTTREE.
Yeah. What? First, I guess before we could talk about it specifically, because Lo Siento is a western, a cartoon western as you call it, which I really like and I think is pretty apt. I guess one thing is, before SUTTREE, in the development of Lo Siento, is Cormac McCarthy anywhere in that inspirational framework?
I wouldn't say so. No, okay. I don't think. I think I read my first Cormac McCarthy book 2022 or 23. So I've been working on Lo Siento for several years at that point.
Okay. Right on. Yeah. I was just kind of curious. I'm not that I necessarily felt a huge overlap.
But is in the yeah. I know what you're saying.
Yeah. Any like Western now has some.
It's built in the expectation. Yeah, kind of.
But it's probably good that you got some writing out of you done out in the world before you got into Cormac McCarthy, because there's a lot of people, and I am one of them, who start reading Cormac McCarthy at some point, and then they try to write like him for about 2, 3, 4 years. And then kind of come out of it on the other side and like, okay, now I got to figure out who the hell I am actually. So I don't know if that will happen to you, but it's good that you already have a phase before all of that. So
yeah, right. I'm curious real quick on that thought, because I feel like another writer who is very similar is Pynchon. Kind of similarly, I sent this to one of my old professors, when it was still something I was working on, and was like, hey, what do you, read a couple pages. And he said that it favored Thomas Pynchon at times. I was like, well, maybe I should go check out Pynchon. And so I did very similarly to McCarthy. I had it kind of built out and then was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. This resonates. Just out of curiosity.
Sure.
Does it strike you as being more like the one or the other, or?
I would say it's more Pynchon in the sort of humor and the register that things happen at, and and SUTTREE's very funny too, but the humor
totally.
I guess there's some similarities, but just like almost like the energy. There's Yeah, there's like a little bit of zaniness in there.
Kineticism
that,
or whatever.
Yeah, McCarthy's funny sometimes, but he's never zany. Pynchon is like the maestro of zany,
Yeah.
and other things as well. So I'd put it. Yeah, I would put it a little bit closer to that, that side of things.
Makes
for
sense.
Sure. Yeah. On SUTTREE. So where like had you read other Cormac McCarthy before?
Yes,
SUTTREE?
SUTTREE is the third one I think I've read. I
Okay.
think I've read.
Right on.
I don't know. You'll have to evaluate my Cormac McCarthy path, but I think I've read like most novices of Cormac.
Mm-hmm.
I've read Blood Meridian. I've read No Country, and now I've read SUTTREE. I only read SUTTREE. SUTTREE was on my radar. I wanted to read it. A buddy of mine from Huntsville, I told him like, "Hey man, I think I'm gonna buy SUTTREE this winter and read it." And he said, "Give me your address. It's a summer read." And he sent it to me, and I was like, "Well, I guess I got to read it in the summer." So
yeah, I
that's
mean,
why I
it's
did
kind
it.
of sweaty, a little bit. Yeah,
There are winter scenes in there, but yeah, definitely kind of grotesque, swimming in jeans, you know.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I guess overall, like, what was your experience like reading SUTTREE? What did you think of it? Kind of high level, at least.
Yeah, it is a fantastic book. It's such a remarkably different book from the other two I've read by him, in a way that I appreciate, but also adds sort of to my my understanding of McCarthy's depth. Because, right, like Blood Meridian, of course, it's sort of this historic, it happens over a span of time, and there's all this darkness, and there's sort of these malignant forces underlying everything that's sort of on display on the stage of the Western. And then you get like No Country for Old Men, which is it's still a good book, but it's sort of like it knows where it's punching for, and it's very streamlined. It's made to be a movie, and all kinds of little cool things that aren't captured by the film, but it still reads that way. But then there's this thing that almost feels like it's a I don't know, like one of those I forget what they're called, but like a platform multiplayer kind of novel, where it's just more expansive, and he wrote it over a much longer period. And it's like he's running into all these NPCs almost and going on these missions. That's kind of makes me feel like Don Quixote in that way, runs into somebody and gets taken on this adventure. Yeah, so it's a fantastic book.
Yeah, there is definitely a bit of like where's this going exactly? Like Blood Meridian, you're like, oh, this ends in a bloodbath or something.
Yeah.
Like you can feel, and this is sort of like, man, what is the sort of path? And I think that's kind of intentional, because I think if you're living like SUTTREE, and a lot of us have had periods of our lives where, man, pretty unmoored, don't really know what we're gonna do, having a hard time with the drinking or the whatever it is, and it does kind of feel like that. We're like, not necessarily like I'm damned, but like, whoa, what is this? What happens from here? How do you get from here to anywhere else? It doesn't seem possible.
You're trapped in an episodic format,
right?
For sure.
Right. Yeah. And then anytime you try to do something, your day gets pulled. You've got some crazy guy that you feel like you owe a favor, and you got to handle that situation,
right.
or you've got to,
exactly.
Yeah,
you find yourself going from one bar to another in Mobile because the bartender's saying, "You got to pour this guy a drink." Believe me, I get it.
Right. Yeah. And then the next day, you were gonna do something the next day, and that's not gonna happen anymore. And for sure. Yeah, I think this book. I know a bit about McCarthy's biography, like his life story, and this is definitely the closest thing we get to a sort of autobiography is this work, and it's kind of the Cormac McCarthy version of a kind of a coming of age story. He didn't live on a raft in the middle of on a houseboat, but he did have some living situations that were pretty rough as a young man. Sort of, his father was a big to-do lawyer for the Tennessee Valley Authority, and he was supposed to. Cormac McCarthy, of course, was he's supposed to go to college and become a kind of professional or whatever, and that track was completely unappealing to him. And SUTTREE is a sort of a similar thing. You feel like it's from the outside, it's sort of like, well, he could just get his act together and he'd be fine, but it's like it's not So easy.
And you can really feel the lived pain. Like I remember the piece where he goes back for his son's death and you experience that flashback, and it
Yeah.
just feels so viscerally like I know what this feels like. Even though I've
Yeah.
never lost my child and I've never left my, never gotten into a fist fight with the in-law, it's like I have been in that version of some similar episode in my own life.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so well rendered. I mean, I think I'd be curious what your take on this is. One of the sort of Cormac McCarthy sort of stylistic hallmarks is this almost no interiority, right? Every sentence is mostly describing something that's happening in the world and not in somebody's head. And it's interesting because to me, like, I love that approach. I think it's super interesting. And yet there's also this way in which, like, kind of the powerful and unique thing about writing fiction is that you can go into a person's head. And so I'm just fascinated by like what he manages to pull off by like avoiding that entirely. like,
And it's interesting too, right? Because like, yes, he doesn't. And this is one of my favorite things too, I'll say about, I think, not this book necessarily, but about like a form of writing that this book specifically sort of seems exemplary of or participates in, where there is, yes, like you say, you don't get inside access to any of the characters' interiority. There is no interiority in that sense, but very often it seems like we get sort of the thoughts of the narrator, or the narrator's thoughts are infused with the events as they unfold, right? And so there are all these observational, and I think even the narrator uses personal pronouns in it.
yeah.
And I think too, specifically that melded with the sort of, it seemed to SUTTREE, there's this sort of like layering of voices that like Brothers Karamazov, right? Like the narrator
Yeah.
does something very similar, or even like somebody like modern philosophers who are telling you about all these, strictly defined concepts and how they unfold throughout their, system or whatever. Like all of these things where people, characters, ideas are defined as objects which move according to the narratorial sort of style or sleight of hand. And I feel like SUTTREE does that, but at the same time, like that narrator's voice is so inextractable.
Yeah.
It really is the musculature that holds the whole thing together.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's it gets me thinking about, because one thing I'm always, I kind of referred to the sort of unique ability of literature to get into the heads of somebody. I think a lot about, and we started talking about Lo Siento, and my first reference was, hey, it's kind of like Wes Anderson, and and I think as writers, in 2025, you're not really going to be able to get out past the reach of cinema. Like we're never going to be able to write in a pre-cinematic approach or perspective. It's just not going to happen. We've gone too far for that. We've all seen way too many movies.
Yeah.
But there's a thing that I think that McCarthy can do, and other writers can do it, obviously, but like that I find useful to think about and trying to accomplish is there's a certain sort of like expressionism in which, and I think this is, we can kind of attach this to what you were saying, where it's like, okay, if you describe a setting in a particular way, you can imply, you're strongly implying the mood or something about the interior conscious state of the characters that are occupying this. And good films do this too. I mean, if you watch like Tarkovsky, he's not just panning a camera across a field because he thinks it looks pretty. He's trying to like make something poetically resonate with you about the characters that are also in it, right?
The way that Kafka describes a machine that his character is looking at or something.
Right. And so there's the one step removed, but obviously we're talking about, on some level, we're talking about the characters there as well. And I noticed too in this book, in SUTTREE, I don't know why I'm so much on this sort of cinema thing and seeing cinema and McCarthy and all of that, but There's also something he does more in this book that I haven't seen him do, see him do nearly as much in his later books. Where he tells you, he not only tells you what the scene looks like, but he tells you exactly where to look. Like there's a scene in SUTTREE where he literally describes a person as their shoes and like tells you exactly where their shoes step, which is a total cinema move, right? Where you're like, you don't want to show the person and they enter the room. And he does this kind of thing a number of times. I think later on in his writing career, when you get to like Blood Meridian and No Country for Old Men, I think he sort of starts to, I guess my point is, I think he refined the cinematic influence over time. And in SUTTREE, you're seeing it sort of like him still kind of figuring it out to a certain extent.
Yeah, there are a couple of places I want to take that, but definitely agree with you. Well, and one of the things that I read last night was like, he's talking to somebody, he's asking about Gene Harrogate, and then all of a sudden, and this is Harrogate. That's how he introduces Harrogate knocking on SUTTREE's door, coming after him. But I think to your point, he is a writer who wrote a book to have a movie made out of, so we ought to think about him through the lens of cinema. To me, that is something that seems clearly evident. But SUTTREE, there is something about it that makes it seem like, I don't know if more youthful, but more like the world is sort of has this manifold, capacity, and it sort of can impress upon you as you make impressions upon it. And it seems a lot more open world, I guess, exploratory. It makes me think so much of Bob Dylan's Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues, where it's just sort of this character walking through a parade of, misfortunes that befall him, and, shady cops and evil women and, all this sort of stuff. And it feels like that, and I think similarly, Dylan wouldn't have written that song in the 70s, it had to be in his mid-20s.
Right. Yeah, there is something, I think you're right. I think there is something about SUTTREE that's it's actually, for how amazing it is, it's kind of like a very young man's book, but as though written by somebody who who has this carefully cultivated skills of a lifetime. It's maybe what's so anomalous about it. Yeah, a 60-year-old man is not going to write SUTTREE.
Yet I do think, and this is something that was very on my brain as I entered maybe the last 25% of the book, was just okay, from the moment he starts dating, the prostitute from Chicago, all of a sudden the register shifts, and it's much more it's not psychological because you don't get the interiority, but it's the color palette sort of expands and there's less of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It takes on this sort of shape-shifting, dreamier, more mature sort of
That's a good
cadence
point.
that I would associate with later Cormac.
Yeah. I wonder if that's. It's always tricky to understand, what's intentional. I wonder if that's. You wonder how much of that is a decision, right?
You do.
At this point, I'm going to shift gear. I'm going to shift gears, and this is going to hit a different register now.
And I wonder too, to the intentionality for sure. And then it ends though very much sort of in line with its earlier flavor. The last couple of pages, he's strapping up the boots, he's hitching a ride, and the multiplicity kind of takes shape again. And so I wonder, was that just an episode, or?
It might be. I mean, it might be that,
he knew how it was going to end when he was younger.
Yeah. Well, that kind of thing I'm starting to think about, and I had never really thought about that, though. Now that you mentioned this part with the prostitute girlfriend, you're totally right that the sort of tenor of the whole thing changes. I kind of wonder if this is sort of again, this is getting English majory, and I could be totally wrong. But
I love it.
If this is implying that that is him getting further away from implying that SUTTREE's getting further away from SUTTREE, the
he is inhabiting a life Yeah.
it doesn't register for him when he's on the boat. Like everything has these sort of mythic Faulknerian proportions and resonances, and then when he gets into like he gets into more conventional, weirdly conventional life. I mean, at least there's money.
He's got a car. Yeah.
Yeah. He can eat a hamburger. He can drive a car. Whatever. If that gets him further, like his antennas get dull and his senses
Tunnel
get
vision.
dull. Yeah.
He's occupying a perspective, and the POV changes. Yeah.
I think there might be something to it. It's really interesting to read this. I know we were kind of talking beforehand, and you haven't gotten to the Passenger and Stella Maris yet, so we won't talk about it too much. But for people who are listening, it's really interesting to pair this book with The Passenger and Stella Maris, these two paired books that Cormac McCarthy put out at the end of his life. SUTTREE was sort of the first novel he worked on, even though it wasn't the first novel he completed and it wasn't the first one that came out. I mean, it's, I think he probably started working on it when he was 18 or something. But there's a commonality in the sort of protagonists of these SUTTREE, and then in The Passenger, the character Bobby Western, and of course the name Western is not a coincidence by any means. But there is an interesting thing. I mean, SUTTREE's sort of looking for something, I guess, but maybe wouldn't know it if he saw it, or doesn't even really know what it is exactly. And then Bobby Western in The Passenger is like he found it and it wasn't actually what he thought it would be. There's this sort of like, come to the edge, this is where I thought it would, this is the thing, and it doesn't mean anything, or I can't actually have it. I thought I could actually have it if I got here, but I can't. And I don't know, there's something really interesting about putting these two books next to each other. If you're trying to think about the whole, like, Cormac McCarthy's entire career and as a figure, these are probably, to me, actually the two most important books to get in his head to some extent.
Interesting, because you feel, to your point, you feel some of that when you're reading SUTTREE, where it's like, he undergoes he goes to the hospital and comes out, and there's like a sort of an internal change. But all throughout, he never like latches on to an object, and when he does, right, in the case of his family, it doesn't last or whatever.
Right.
And I think that to me is a interesting contrast with like Don Quixote, right, where he just sort of withers in his deathbed and admits it was all a folly, it was all a dream, where it's an inversion of that. And you do hope that he finds what he's after, but there's the question, right, of will it satisfy him?
Right. Yeah, and the Don Quixote comparison is really interesting. I mean, obviously, everything's sort of influenced by Don Quixote, right?
Yeah,
but anything that's this episodic, it sort of has to be, and has a character who, I mean, SUTTREE to me is relatable, but he's also kind of ridiculous in a certain way.
He's ridiculous, and he's a little bit of a son of a bitch, Yeah, for sure. I agree.
He's a bit of a tough guy, but even that seems like it's kind of an act. Like he kind of puts that on, that he's sort of a tough guy. And his relationship with Harrogate, and Harrogate being one of the funniest characters ever.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I howled so many times in the first, third of the book.
Well, the one thing that's so good about it is like, about Harrogate is like, it's one of the best depictions of an actual dumb person that I've ever encountered. Right? Because like, you like, a lot of great comedy comes from basically the person's kind of dumb, right? Like, if you watch like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, the humor is that they're all kind of dumb.
Yeah, right? The idiot plot. Yeah,
and it's everywhere. This isn't a judgment. It's just like if you want to make something funny, that's a great place to start. But oftentimes the dumbness is it's clearly contrived. Mm-hmm. Where Harrogate actually, to me, feels like a dumb person. Like, there's just things he doesn't quite know, and when he doesn't know them, he sort of doubles down on them. Yep. Like, it's a very, his whole like, he's just gonna escape jail and go to like down the street to Knoxville, and they'll never find him. Like, that how do you possibly?
And when he when he gets out of jail the first time and he like comes upon the rag picker, you know, man, you got it fixed up pretty slick in there in the cave, you know. Well, I can get along with anybody. You can't see that the rag picker like wants, you know, can't see danger 2 inches in front of his face.
Yeah.
I do too. One of my favorite things about McCarthy, from what I've read, is just the way that he vernacularizes the dialogue, you know, so richly. And all the God Almighties in the text and from Harrogate, like, oh my gosh, yeah, it just incredible.
So yeah. That's interesting. The sort of kind of writing in accent or dialect. It's like he doesn't. There's such a sweet spot, isn't there? Like it's so easy to overdo and become like. Sort of make itself known too much. And he seems to ride that line like exactly right.
Where it just adds the richness. Well, and sort of to your point about like, you know, describing the locale or the visuals of a scene, like just having the sonic qualities of the speech embodied by the text, right? Not in the text, but by it, like adds so much richness to sort of the experience of it. Lo Siento, my editor, Jacob, not Jacob Everett, but Jacob Stovall, that was a frequent conversation we had. I think the finished product has less vernacular. But I really think it adds so much when that balance is struck. And when it's there, like on the page.
Yeah. Less is more in a way, but none is not the correct amount.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I occasionally read something from sort of, I don't know, the 19th century or early 20th century, and you know, there's a black character, and it's just so over the top that it's like it shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be that hard to read a few words and basically know what those words are supposed to be.
Yeah, totally. Well, and then you read like Mason and Dixon. Have you read that book?
I haven't read Mason and Dixon.
Oh my gosh. And it's written in like I don't even know how to describe it. It's written like it's got the apostrophes and 19th century, 18th century language whenever it's set, and it reads like you're getting an address from someone at that time, and it's just whatever 900 pages of that.
Yeah.
Like he committed.
That's intense. Intense. Yeah, and he spent like 20 years writing that, right?
Did he? I believe it,
I think so. Yeah.
I believe it.
That's one thing, you think about sort of like this notion of sort of artistic integrity or like taking chances or whatever. Like, man, I'm going to spend 20 years writing this, and I'm sure it's brilliant. I'm sure it's brilliant, but also it's just like what a crazy thing to just keep chipping away at in a way. Like having no time where you're like, well, what about the audience?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I guess that's what makes them artists. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. No, it's cool. I'm definitely going to get to that at some point for sure. Yeah. Yeah, and we're Shadow Ticket just came out today. I actually have a copy of that. Yeah.
Nice.
So for people listening, I'm going to be talking to the writer David Leo Rice here in a couple weeks about that. So looking forward to that for sure. We'll see. There's an interesting thing happening with like the last generation of surviving American artists. So like Cormac McCarthy puts these books out right before he goes. Thomas Pynchon, he's 88. Maybe he'll live another 20 years, but chances are that he won't. And then you've got like people like back to cinema, like Ridley Scott. Whatever you think of these movies, he's like swinging for the bleachers. He's like 86 years old, and he's like, I'm gonna make Napoleon. I'm gonna make like he's just like it's kind of nuts. Like I most of the stuff he's put out, I don't know if he even the second Gladiator movie was awful. I didn't like Napoleon very much. But like I just kind of respect the fact that like an 84-year-old multimillionaire does not have to be like going this hard.
There is something about it. Yeah, and I wonder too, without really going there, I wonder, first of all, how inscribed we've become in the last 5 years with just like the sediment of hustle culture, like everybody from top to bottom. But then I wonder too, like, to what extent that informed and is informed by sort of AI productivity, that's been in front of us now for a decade or whatever. So
Yeah.
I admire it for sure, but I wonder
Yeah.
too, like, we're all just bots. Are we all just NPCs?
Yeah, well, it's getting more like that all the time, for sure. Yeah, yeah. There's an interesting. I think it presents like, I mean, I'm pretty, and I'm pretty much. I think pretty much that Gen AI is basically Pandora's box, and we've opened it, and all hell will eventually break loose for sure. But then, as like people in sort of creative domains, there is like an element of like, you almost have to start thinking about what you're doing in some kind of relationship to it. Not that you're necessarily going to use it, but like, what impact, if any, is this going to have on what I do? Yeah, I don't know. And I think everybody's answer for that is probably going to have to be different for sure.
I think so. And I think too, I don't know, what is the end cultural product that it's being used to synthesize, right? It's like, I wouldn't read a novel written by AI, but I read marketing content written by AI all the time, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I think there is, I guess I get my redemptive conclusion, any kind of redemptive conclusion I could come to derives from sort of that distinction, and just hoping that, which they won't, but hoping that more people say, oh yeah, I guess this thing can do commercial stuff and these human created things are art,
Yeah.
See the difference.
I think the thing is I think the majority of individuals are pretty much are either neutral or sort of against it and repulsed by it. I think that's sort of the average person. I think the problem is culturally, the people that a solid, I shouldn't even say majority, because who knows, a lot of the people who sort of make those decisions about sort of where to invest dollars in cultural productions and stuff, they're not seeing it the same way that like you and I are. And so 60% of the people don't want to see AI generated movies. Well, we'll make a lot of money on those 40% who don't care, and we'll just go with it, I think that's what's alarming. It's like you're just going to see the Sam Altmans are just going to be like, we'll just go. We'll just
doing it anyway. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And I also think like AI movies consumed by AI bots like inevitably boosts, engagement metrics and stuff. So
yeah. It's I mean, we'll see what happens. I'm trying not to get like disillusioned about it, sort of look for
it's here.
Yeah. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
No, try to have that sort of, but it does make me think like, well, then maybe you should just write Mason and Dixon, right? Because like, what do you got to lose, right? Yeah, just go for it, right? Do something weird.
I feel the same way, where it's like you just got to double down on your thing.
Yeah. Let's just make it even less something that AI would come up with. Yeah, that's where kind of my head is at with it. It's like, I'm not going to be able to write more words than the AI, so I got to write very different ones.
It's strange to think, and this may be neither here nor there, but just like, okay, is that what our version of avant-garde is, where it's just totally reactionary? It's outside the scope of what is streamlined, but that's still so materially conditioned.
Yeah. That's I guess kind of what I'm saying. Like we're all gonna have to like figure out what our relationship is to it. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen. I think we're like through a sort of singularity point of some sort here, where it's gonna get real weird. Yeah.
It feels like we're turning into mole people in a way, like burrowing our tunnels and
Yeah, well, I mean, this is part of the reason I'm motivated to do this podcast. It's like there are still people, there are actually humans out there, right? It's like I just
Yeah.
remind myself it's not dead internet, like
Yeah, I know.
Lake Markham is a real person, right? Yes, as far as I could tell, he's a real guy. He's really doing something out there, and in fact, you can go see him in Asheville, North Carolina, on October 21st. Yeah, well,
Yeah,
go
there we
see
go.
him. Literally, go
That's
buy
right.
a book, have him sign it. Yeah, it'd be a real experience. No Gen AI was involved at all.
Send a Lo Siento postcard, or also we're gonna have Lo Siento car air fresheners with
Really?
the image of the semi truck bursting out of the page. That's gonna be like the air freshener.
I love
so
it.
yeah, lots of merch and goodies
That's
for the
awesome.
real world people.
For the real world. It's a real world.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. I absolutely love it. I guess let's we've talked about a couple of books. We've talked about SUTTREE, we've talked about your book, we've talked about Don Quixote a little bit. Are there any other books that are in the Lake Markham sort of personal canon? We've talked about a couple other books too. On Photography by Susan Sontag, the Locos, what was it? Locos Human Gestures.
Comedy of Gestures.
Comedy of Gestures. We talked about that. Are there any other books that are in the personal canon that you might recommend to somebody?
Yeah, that's a great question. Man, I love everything. If it's written down, I want to read it. Like even almanacs,
Yeah.
I would say like Baudrillard's America was pivotal for me. I read it while I was on a road trips through the desert or whatever. Sickness Unto Death by Soren Kierkegaard. The World is Will and Representation by Arthur Schopenhauer. Also, if you want to talk about that sort of like whatever Don Quixote, SUTTREE, sort of open world, just like Tom Thumb's Blues, he is somehow able to convert like metaphysics into sort of very mundane minutia, which his language is so beautiful.
Interesting. Cool.
And then I'd say Butcher's Crossing by John Williams, which I know I sent you, but that book I read every several years, and it's so
so
remarkable.
good, right?
Yeah.
Everybody talks about Stoner, and I feel like Butcher's Crossing doesn't get the love that. The Stoner's great, but like
I haven't read Stoner.
I've read all of the books that it's not that big of a
three.
shelf, but Butcher's Crossing is the next one that I'll read again for sure.
It's so phenomenal, and it's just like the irony is not funny. It's very ironic, but it's very bitter and bleak. But
the winter over with the buffalo hides, or the winter storm. Oh my god!
And the return, and and it's what strikes me about that book is there is a way in which it could be read comically. If all those things happened, but like the cadence was just slightly changed. It's like bottom fell out.
Right.
But fantastic book.
Yeah, no, that's amazing work. He's a guy who sort of didn't get his flowers, as they say. I think during his lifetime.
Yeah, well, I know that he spent so much of his career as sort of being like a teacher and advisor and like editor for his students and stuff, which I find really. I think about that a lot. It's like some biographical detail of all the authors I've read, like that sticks with me. Like he has these 3 wonderful books, and he's sort of spent his life in service to his students.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And I think I went to graduate school for writing, and so I knew a bunch of writers who were also teachers. It's becoming a more and more difficult sort of role to maintain as time goes on, as they get sort of replaced with adjuncts and whatnot. But that was for a long time, and to some degree still, like a really cool little niche that a person could fit into, right?
Yeah.
You write some books. They're not huge bestsellers necessarily, but they have their audience, and then you spend the other half of your time trying to help the next generation sort of figure out what they're doing. So
that was my dream, but I feel like that is kind of what I guess indie lit is trying to do, something similar maybe, or maybe it affects that way, or at least with the people who have positive motivations or whatever. But it also, like, man, I guess maybe everything's just been turned into a monetizable hustle.
Well, it
So,
it is. That's the thing. It's like everything kind of has to have a dollar sign over it now, and the the dollars themselves seem to get more and more difficult to actually get your hands
yeah.
on. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean that's like this show. Is. I do these conversations like with you, and then I have these main episodes where we go pretty in depth on a book, and that's hopefully like what you'd get if you went to a classroom and talked about that book. And so I'm, trying to create like a virtual version of that experience to some degree, get all the boring crap out of it. But yeah, then I, at the same time, like that's the spirit of the thing. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, how many downloads did I get today? Did I get, how did I get a new paid subscriber? Oh, cool. It's you have. I'm on that track as much as anybody.
I have a buddy here in Chicago that we do readings, book club, and we'll do like a pairing of some philosophy or history with a fiction.
That's awesome.
Aristotle, Flannery O'Connor, or what else
cool.
have we done? We've done Proust and Merleau-Ponty,
cool.
just sort of Dostoevsky and Kierkegaard, but we very much want to recreate that feeling of being in graduate school because, it just didn't make sense for us. But like, even though we're not tracking our downloads or our plays or whatever, like it nonetheless bears sort of the form of consumption, like we are consuming these texts and going through this it takes on the form of a hobby now, and there's all that sort of.
Right. Well, that's sort of like, yeah, this is kind of an interesting, we're circling around stuff I'm thinking about all the time, because it's like you end up kind of getting entangled in that process, like almost no matter what you do, in a way, like whether it's to justify the time spent doing it or to like just because that's the nature of the systems that you use to conduct it. Like it seems like it's inescapable, and I don't know. There's like no, in a way, I guess the thing I'm trying to figure out is like finding that sort of having a certain degree of okayness with it being like that while you're still doing the thing that you want to do. It's a difficult dance to do, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the cost that your passion comes with,
Yeah.
In this day and age, in this historical context, that's at least how I look at it. The alternative is not being able to do it at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's an interesting trade we make. I have one other sort of area to go toward, and you're a Capricorn, right?
I'm a Pisces.
You're a Pisces. Where did Capricorn come from? Okay.
Go for it.
Tell me what it means to be a Pisces. I guess let's start there.
Ooh, I think I would say I strongly identify with Piscean characteristics. Typically, much more intuitive, spiritual, boundaryless. Like everything kind of belongs to everything. Everything's connected. Not very good at math. I think it's the last sign of the the zodiac, and so it is said to possess the lessons which all preceding signs have learned. And I'm always freaking out my girlfriend because I'm like, it's the sign of death and rebirth, the alpha and the omega, transformation, all that stuff. And so I'm very attuned to the existential sorts of crevices and corners and stuff like that.
Interesting. So I'm an Aries, and I hadn't thought of it this way. That's the first sign.
Yeah.
Right. And so that would suggest that I've got like a long way to go.
No, I think one of my best friends and one of my best professional relationships ever was my boss for a long time was an Aries, and we just, he had sort of the like practical, like not stubbornness in the way that Taurus is stubborn, but there's this sort of like can't be tamed quality. Like as soon as the zodiac ends, Aries is right out the gate, hot on fire, And he had that, and I kind of had this sort of like dreamy, big picture thing. Between the two of us, we could put together some pretty cool ideas.
Right. Yeah, actually, more than one of my very close friends are Pisces, and there is a
Nice.
sort of a yin yang kind of thing that happens. I feel like, and as long as you're not trying to expect the other person to be just like you, then you can sort of make some cool magic with that sort of personality. 'Cause
Totally.
I mean, I relate to being an Aries, like you say you relate to being a Pisces. Like I feel like if you just gave me the descriptions and I'd never heard of that is the one I would end up picking to apply to myself, I think.
Well, even just like looking at our backgrounds here, you with all the really red hot colors and bold, and me with like the watery Japanese.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny too because my girlfriend's a Virgo, which is the sister sign of Pisces. It's sort of like exact opposites. I guess like a Libra would be to you, but I'm always just without thinking about it wearing the color blue. And she's
that right?
always just wearing brown and green, and it's like,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've got deep blue eyes, and she's got very like green, like green brown eyes. Yeah, kind of funny.
Yeah. No, it's interesting how that plays out. I do feel like to a certain degree, though, I think I'm a bit older than you. I'm well into my 40s now. I do think some of the Aries fire has sort of like not gone out, but it used to burn a lot hotter.
Turn to
You know what I
steam,
mean?
maybe. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Because it was, my 20s were like, I'm going to do everything all the time. That was sort of the attitude.
Rip roaring.
Yeah. And so, yeah.
The directionless, like no boundary, kind of just explore, see where it goes. Definitely got me into some places where I didn't want to be in my 20s. So I think I have, in a similar way, had to take on much more of like a rational sort of like intentionality mindset. I get to have more dreams if I'm careful about where they lead me.
Yeah. Well, I've definitely learned that. Like you have to sleep.
Yeah.
You can't just go. You can't be going all the time. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think there's probably a way of looking at the whole astro. So I'm more so than astrology, though I'm very interested in it. I'm obsessed to a certain degree with the tarot, and so I'm constantly, looking at these sort of what are the sort of implications on the self for any particular presented sort of circumstance. And so we're talking about like what these two being these two things for each of us, like what the implications of that is. It's like it feels like each one of those signs has a potentially sort of a different curriculum, like a different characteristic that has to be
Overcome.
I guess sorted out, or maybe not overcome, but like turned into something that's sort of, I would use useful, but like
productive, whatever it is,
word, right? Something that's like, like the fire thing. Like, okay, we can't just like burn the forest down, but what if we like really concentrate it and we use it to, I think there's something to that like each one of these sets of characteristics, it's like the riddle of your life that you're supposed to figure out to some extent.
I think so too, and I think more than like believing in the astrology itself, it like gives me a language for understanding myself and what my shortcomings might be, so that I can take on some of that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there. That's the one thing. It's like if you compare them to, if you compare the sets of characteristics to sort of any other, sort of personality. Psychological personality sorting mechanism, they seem like they have so much more texture to them. They're not like a coordinate. They're this set of interdependence aspects that sort of play off each other, and they have extremes and they have pros and cons.
It's like a system.
Yeah. Whereas if you get into the sort of like the what is it? Like the Myers-Briggs stuff.
Yeah.
It's useful. It's interesting to a certain degree, but there's no poetry to it. There's no like verve to it. It's just like
Zodiac's ancient though. It's like people hadn't yet broken up systems of thinking or belief into like science and art and all that. and it's had so much time to age and enrich,
Yeah.
you know.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's like one of the things that I love about it. I've told people before, like, I don't know what if it has anything to do with the cosmos. It probably does, but like, you should probably just figure out which one you are anyway, and see like, maybe it doesn't
Yeah.
have anything to do with your birthday. Maybe just read them and figure out which one you are, and see
That's a
what
good
that means
point.
for you.
Yeah, I like
so,
that. I also
yeah.
like I work in sales, but I find I don't know that I use this in sales, but it might be the same part of me that works in sales, you know. My brain is I find astrology a really helpful way of remembering people's birthdays. It's like, oh yeah, he's a Libra. Oh yeah, he's a
Yeah.
Leo. And I can locate them within a 30-day period pretty easily.
Interesting.
You know.
Interesting. Now, here's a question for you. In being in sales, do you feel like you can identify what people are, like, given some amount of time?
I think yes and no. Like sometimes, and that's characteristic of Pisces too. Is they're supposed to be psychic, you know.
Right,
But
right.
I don't know. I've successfully guessed before. I've unsuccessfully guessed before. Usually, I can reduce to like an element. I'd be like, yeah,
Right.
I'm picking up big air sign energy from that guy, you know, or
Right,
something
right,
like
right.
that. I knew Cormac McCarthy was a water sign.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting one that I didn't guess. So Jean-Paul Sartre, Cancer, Albert Camus, Scorpio, Maurice Merleau-Ponty, Pisces. I didn't guess that they were, their signs on the nose, but they're like these
Yeah.
three existential philosophers from France who are in conversation with one another, and they're all water signs. They all feel very watery.
Interesting.
But it's like, you know what I mean? Like there's something to that, I feel like.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I think the elemental stuff that's elemental stuff is big in tarot as well. Like that.
Is it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm constantly thinking about how things break down along these sort of four compass points. It's fascinating. And the more you look for it, the more you see it, for sure.
That's the way it goes, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, like SUTTREE, watery novel. I mean, I would characterize Lo Siento as more of a earthy novel, personally.
Definitely,
but I could be
yeah.
wrong about that. Yeah.
Arid, dust blown, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then that sort of thing has implications too. And the other thing, this is fascinating when I caught on to this, and my audience is probably annoyed with me talking about it because I've mentioned it once or twice before. But if you're watching, and this doesn't happen in every movie, but if you're watching any movie that's like kind of a big adventure, kind of epic movie, something with big set pieces and stuff like that, and action, there will be at least when it's good, there will be a scene that is earth. There will be a fire scene. There'll be a water scene. There'll be an air scene.
Interesting.
And sometimes it's kind of subtler than others, but like at some point there'll be wrestling in the dirt. Somebody will be drowning. Something will be on fire. Something will be falling. Yeah, I don't know. That's something I noticed a long time ago, and I see it over and over and over and over and over again.
Interesting. I would say when I was writing Lo Siento, I knew that there had to be a big, heavy rainstorm, and I knew that there had to be something that burned down. And I wonder if
I didn't even think about that, but yeah.
And
I don't want to give too much away, but yes.
That's true. Yeah, good point.
But yeah, no, absolutely. I didn't even register it. I wasn't even thinking about that. But you hit all. I think you hit all of them. Yeah.
Crazy. That's a good point. I'll have to start looking out for it. One of my favorite movies of all time is Once Upon a Time in the West, and I am sure I have to look at that now. Yeah, it's got to.
It does. Yeah.
It meets all the other criteria.
Yeah, for sure. Well, maybe let's call it there. Lake, this was such a pleasure. It was so cool getting to get to know you a little bit, and I'm so happy that I got a chance to read Lo Siento. I'm always looking to read stuff. There's always so much to read, right? And I read a lot for this show, and I was so happy to get a copy of this and that it was good, because you never know. But genuinely, people, it's good. Pre-order it right now from Apocalypse Confidential. Best in the game at the moment, in my opinion. And yeah, Lake, anything else before we kind of sign off here?
Eat your vegetables. That's all I can say.
Yeah, that's good advice for sure. All right,
Awesome.
folks, look out for the Shadow Ticket episode coming soon. Also, conversation with David Osborne coming up, and what else do I got? Oh, I got a little special treat for you paid subscribers, but I'm not even going to say what it is. You'll just see it when it happens.
Nice little
okay.
secret.
Yeah, all right. See you later, everybody.
See you, Brad.
Have you ever heard about Willie the Weeper? Had a job as a chimney sweeper. He had the dope habit and he had it bad. Listen while I tell you about a dream he had. He went down to the dope shop one Saturday night. He knew the lights would all be burning bright. Well, I guess he smoked a dozen pills or more. When he woke up, he was on a foreign shore. The Queen of Sheba was the first he met. She called him lovey-dovey and honey pet. She gave him a great big automobile with a diamond headlight and a golden wheel. Down in Honolulu, Willie fell in a trance, seeing the dusky beauties do the hula dance. His sweetie got in jail and Willie sure did shout when he got the news that she had wiggled out. He landed with a splash in the river Nile, riding on a sea-going crocodile. He winked at Cleopatra, she said, ain't he a sight? He said, how about a date for next Saturday night? He had 1,000,000 cattle and he had 1,000,000 sheep, had 1,000,000 vessels on the ocean deep, had $1,000,000 all in nickels and dimes. Well, he knew because he counted it 1,000 times. He landed in New York one evening late. He asked his sugar for an after date, started to kiss her and she started to pout when bang, bang, and the dope gave